Hey everybody, welcome back to the K2N Online Paddle School. We're back here on YouTube, and today we're going over understanding and maximizing your hip leverages within the paddle stroke. We'll break down how you use your hips in the Outrigger canoe stroke as well as in the Surfski kayak scenario. The approach to the two are similar, like a Venn diagram with some overlap, but there are some distinctions between the two to understand. We've had a wonderful year here on YouTube, and it is all thanks to you all viewing and supporting the channel. The K2NOnlinePaddleSchool.com is running $50 off of our annual subscription to the website, giving you full access to over 200 videos, all kinds of drilling, tactics, and other components that link with racing to make you better. Annual subscription also comes with some video reviews that you can use at any time throughout the year, as well as a month of individualized training programs to help you structure your on-the-water training. 24/7, you can reach out and ask questions to a coach and get direct answers and feedback that will make you better. Make your 2024 season even better. Use coupon code 2024 at checkout and save $50 today. Thank you all so much for supporting the website as well as the YouTube channel, and let's get right to it. As we've talked about in many of our videos in the past, we have the kinetic chain. So we have the ankle, the knee, the hip, the thoracic spine, the shoulder, the elbow, and the hand, and we use this kinetic chain to transfer energy through the entire body into dynamic motion. The better you utilize these chain of joints, the more power you can produce effortlessly. The largest intersection of the kinetic chain is found at the hips and at the top of the shoulders. So we're not talking about the shoulders in relation to moving the arms, but we're thinking about the spine as it attaches to the shoulders, moving side to side. The thing that makes this most complicated is the thoracic spine, which is the mobility you have in the middle of your spinal cord. This causes a disconnect between what your shoulders and your hips are doing. Learning good motion is allowing your hips to connect to the shoulder. So as I move my right hip forward, the shoulder comes forward, and all the joints on this side of the body have also traveled. If I allow the thoracic spine to engage and create this flexibility, my hips can move side to side, and you can see my hands do not move. So I'll do this here. I'm moving my thoracic spine. Now I'm locking my thoracic spine to hold shape, doing the same thing with my hips. Now moves my shoulders and my hands. Maximizing the leverages is understanding the orientation of your torso is driven by the hips. Having disconnect means that your torso is not going to move in the correct manner. We're going to go over what we're looking for between this hip and torso relationship, as well as common mistakes that break the kinetic chain. So the first relationship we're going to talk about is in the kayak setting, because the kayak is one-dimensional with how we utilize the hips, and the canoe becomes multi-dimensional using these same principles and adding another component. So we stress a lot about leg drive and using the hips, and there is the next common mistake of the thoracic spine moving too much, which means your leg and hip motion travels up and gets lost halfway through the torso before it can get to your hands, the paddle, and the water. What we're looking for is as this hip moves, the thoracic spine holds position and the shoulder that is above the hip moves with it. Each time my body and torso moves, it is following the hip. So showing that correctly, this leg will extend, this hip will move, and this shoulder will move. Just like so. So now I'm facing the camera. I am going to load up on the opposite side. This knee is going to extend. This hip and this shoulder are going to move back like so, right? So using my hands as a guide, you can see that my hands are traveling through space, not because they're moving at the shoulder joint here, but because the torso is guiding them back and forth. This is a simple concept, and if we had an iron rod from our hips all the way up to our neck and we had no mobility here, this would be very simple, because you have to actively hold this position. What the common mistake is this leg and this hip will move, which is an excellent skill to have. But now there is too much flexibility in the thoracic spine, and I have extended this leg, moved this hip, but my torso doesn't move. You can see my hands are not going anywhere, my shoulders are not moving anywhere, and I can do this even more exaggerated here by pumping my hips and moving my legs. So at a glance, if somebody's watching you, you have excellent leg drive, you have excellent hip motion, but it's not turning into any meaningful power because we're not maximizing our hip leverages. Using this hip motion, it must connect up to the next link of the kinetic chain. Thoracic spine must stay tight. Keeping the abdomen tight is a way to think about that, but overall just allowing the movement of your hips to allow the movement in your shoulders like so. So this is what we're looking for, and this would be the incorrect way, going back and forth. And I can do that slow, right here. And you can see my thoracic spine moves back and forth, and now I have minimal motion with my upper body. As you complete the stroke, you go through all this motion here, but now you have to reset. Now when the paddle is moving through the air and through the water here, these have to move independently, right? So now I have a motion that looks something like this, as opposed to a motion that looks like this. It is a subtle difference because all the joints are still moving, but one is utilizing the kinetic chain and the other one has a disconnect between those ideas. Going into the canoe stroke, now we need this relationship very similar. The hip comes forward, the shoulder follows it, so I don't want my legs and hips moving with no shoulder motion. When I move my legs, my hip moves and my shoulder moves, and I get a motion that looks like this. But now with the canoe stroke, now we have to lean forward and sit up as another dynamic. So we're coming into a position like so, going low to the water. And as we complete the stroke, we want to come up and sit through that motion, as well as rotating. So I'm forward and rotated. And as I complete this stroke, I'm coming up and turning. So this is the second dynamic motion that we're adding in. It is not purely a hip rotation movement, but now we are looking for hip extension. A great visual guide of hip extension is the deadlift. When you bend over to grab a barbell or a weight, your motion that you are trying to complete is hip extension by pushing your hips forward and standing up. If you lean forward and you do not complete hip extension, you do not complete the deadlift. You must come up with your motion. Orientation of your torso is dictated by the position and movement of your hips. So as we complete these motions, it is easy for the thoracic spine to come down like this, right? So now my torso is facing the ground because my back is able to round in this way. We want the torso to be oriented downwards because of our hips going backward. So as I think about my hips being pushed behind me, you can see that I'm bending over the top. So I've achieved this same position with the middle of my chest that I would here by pushing my hips back. The reason this is so important is as we're completing the canoe stroke, my hips are oriented back. And if I think about pushing my hips forward under my spine, the only way that my torso can move is up. This is very important because as we go into the stroke with downward pressure, if our upper body and our thoracic spine disconnects from our hips can't push forward anymore, bringing me into this upright position. So what will happen is the body will want to continue pushing down with its top half as opposed to using the bottom half. So we have paddlers that go into their catch, into their power, into their exit, and everything collapses on itself. And then at the very end of the stroke, they'll start to sit up to orient for the next. The proper motion that we're looking for is pushing these hips back into flexion, bringing the blade into the water, and the first motion is thinking about bringing my hips forward into hip extension and standing up throughout the stroke. Utilizing both aspects in the canoe stroke is very tricky. It's like rubbing your stomach and tapping your head at the same time, because we have to rotate as well as go into this flexion and extension. So you have two motions that are going on at the same time. Going through one at a time is simple enough. Going through the other one by itself is simple enough as well. Doing both at the same time of coming forward, down, and finishing that motion is a bit more learned. Utilizing your hip leverages in the canoe stroke is thinking about the things that we do in the Surfski and the Kayak with the rotation, but understanding your hips orientation. You're pushing your hips back as you lean forward, and as my hips push into the stroke, my torso has to come up in this relationship. If you are completing your stroke and continuing to go down, it means that your hips are still pushing backwards and your thoracic spine is collapsing on itself like so. This is not as powerful of a position as a deadlift. Grabbing that bar, that weight, and bringing your hips to it is one of the strongest motions that we have at our disposal in human anatomy. So use that to your advantage each time you take a stroke. Excellent, so that's everything. Understanding meaningful hip motion, translating that into proper torso movement will allow you to power your stroke effortlessly and make you go faster today. If you have any questions, or there are any videos that you would like to see made in the future, please reach out anytime. On the channel, we are hoping to expand into the new year and offer some podcasts and some more social dynamics outside of strictly paddle technique on the YouTube page. If there are any guest speakers that you know or are that would like to join us on this future podcast, please reach out anytime. My email is found on the website, or you can reach out on the live chat function on the same website. Thank you all so much for supporting this channel, and we are very excited to continue this into the new year.